The first night shift always feels longer than it really is. I had been working at a fast food restaurant off a nearly empty highway in the Midwest. The kind of place that stayed open 24 hours because truck drivers needed coffee more than sleep. After midnight, the parking lot turned into a black ocean, the lights above casting small islands of yellow on the asphalt. Usually, it was just me and the hum of the fryers. Around 2:17 a.m., a man walked in without making a sound. No car headlights, no engine, nothing. He stood near the counter, tall and still, his hood pulled low over his face. I greeted him, but he didn't respond. He just stared at the menu, unmoving, like he was reading something written behind it. After a full minute, he asked for a burger in a flat, emotionless voice. While I prepared the order, I noticed he never blinked. When I handed him the bag, our fingers touched, and his skin was ice cold. He smiled then, too wide, and whispered, "You lock the doors at 3. I froze. We did. No one outside staff knew that. At 2:59 a.m., the lights flickered. The man was gone, but muddy footprints led from the counter straight to the locked back door, then stopped. There was no exit. I quit the next morning. 2 weeks later, I learned that restaurant used to be a morgue transport stop in the 1970s. Several bodies went missing during overnight shifts. I worked night security at a small medical office building. Nothing dramatic, just cameras and silence. The building was old, built in the early 1900s, and the hallways echoed even when I walked softly. Every night at exactly 1:30 a.m., one of the motion sensors on the third floor would trigger. The third floor was empty. No tenants, no furniture. On my 5th night, curiosity beat fear. I took the elevator up. The doors opened to a dark hallway, lit only by emergency lights. The sensor panel blinked red at the far end. As I walked closer, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, dragging, uneven. I turned around. The hallway was empty. Then I heard breathing, not mine, heavy and close, right near my ear. The air turned cold, and the lights flickered violently. I ran back to the elevator and slammed the button. As the doors closed, I saw a figure standing where I had been seconds before, twisted and wrong, like its joints bent the wrong way. The sensor never triggered again after that night. Management later admitted a patient had once escaped from a psychiatric clinic that used to occupy the 3rd floor. He was never found. Driving overnight deliveries sounds peaceful until the roads go quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. I was hauling packages across rural Pennsylvania, my GPS rerouting me onto back roads. Around 3:40 a.m., I passed the same abandoned farmhouse 3 times. I knew because of the broken windmill out front and a red door hanging off one hinge. The 4th time, the GPS shut off. My headlights flickered and something moved in the road ahead. I slowed down. A woman stood there, pale, wearing old-fashioned clothing, staring straight at me. I rolled down my window and asked if she needed help. She didn't answer. She just pointed toward the farmhouse. I drove away instead. When I checked my mirrors, she was sitting in the back seat, staring at me with hollow eyes. I screamed and swerved, crashing into a ditch. When I came to, I was alone. Police later told me that farmhouse burned down in 1952. A woman died waiting for help after her car broke down nearby. Every few years, someone claims to see her. Some never make it back to the main road. The last job I ever worked overnight was at a hotel front desk near the coast. Storm season meant empty rooms and long nights. At 4:11 a.m., the phone rang, The caller whispered, "Someone is standing in my room." I checked the system. No one was checked into that room. I told the caller that gently. The line went quiet. Then the voice said, "He's smiling now." Security footage showed a man standing behind the desk behind me while I was on the phone. I never saw him in person. The footage cut to static just as he leaned closer. The police found no one, but the footage still exists. I've seen it once. I never watched it again. Some night shifts don't end when the clock hits morning. They stay with you. Forever. The night after that hotel job ended, I tried to convince myself it was over. New city, new work, daylight hours only. That promise lasted exactly 3 weeks. Bills don't care about fear. I took a temporary overnight cleaning job at a large shopping mall that closed at 9 p.m. and reopened at 10 a.m. My shift started at midnight, when the echoes felt louder than sound should ever be. Malls are never truly empty. Even shut down, they breathe. Air vents whisper. Escalators creak like bones. The first few nights were normal until I noticed one thing. Every night, the same store lights would turn on by themselves at exactly 2:22 a.m. It was an old toy store that had gone out of business years ago. Management blamed faulty wiring. On the 6th night, I stood in front of the metal gate and watched the lights flick on one by one, revealing dusty shelves and faded posters of smiling children. Then I heard laughter, soft, slow, too close. The gate rattled from the inside. I stepped back, heart pounding, telling myself it was pipes, air pressure, anything normal. A small hand pressed against the glass from inside the store. Then another. Tiny fingerprints smeared the dust, dragging downward as if whatever was inside was trying to pull itself up. The lights shut off all at once. I ran. I didn't look back. The next day, a coworker quietly told me the truth. In the early 90s, a fire broke out in that store after hours. The alarms failed. 2 children who were hiding during a game never made it out. After quitting that job, I took work as a night dispatcher for a towing company in Arizona. No ghosts, I told myself. Just phones and radios. The desert felt safer, empty, open, honest. At 1:13 a.m., a call came in from a man stranded on Route 88. He gave clear directions, sounded calm, almost relieved. I sent a truck. 10 minutes later, the driver radioed back, confused. There was no car, no man, just skid marks leading straight into the sand. Before I could respond, the phone rang again. Same voice, same calm tone. I'm still waiting. My blood ran cold. I asked him where he was. He repeated the same directions, word for word. I checked old records. That exact stretch of road had dozens of similar calls logged over the last 20 years. Always night, always the same voice, always no one there. I stayed on the line this time. I asked him what happened to his car. He paused, then he said quietly, I never saw the turn. The line went dead. The calls stopped after that night. I don't know why. I don't want to know. The worst shift of my life happened in a hospital records room. No patients, no blood, just files. I worked alone, scanning old documents into digital storage. The room had no windows and one door. Every hour, the lights dimmed slightly to conserve power. At exactly 3:00 a.m., the printer started printing by itself. Page after page slid out, covered in patient names. Every name was crossed out in red ink. I didn't load the printer with red ink. My hands shook as I picked up the pages. The last name on the stack was mine. Behind me, the scanner beeped, as if a new file had been placed on the glass. I didn't turn around. I walked out and never returned. 2 months later, that hospital wing was shut down. Black mold, they said, but mold doesn't know your name. I still get asked why night shift stories all sound the same. Why the fear always creeps in after midnight. I think it's because night strips the world down to what's left when no one is watching. Whatever hides during the day doesn't need to hide anymore. And once it knows you can see it, once it knows you're listening, it never really lets you go. The next job came with a warning I ignored. It was a night shift at a small call center that handled emergency maintenance requests for apartment complexes across several states. The manager told me jokingly, if someone calls and doesn't make sense, just log it and move on. I thought he meant drunk tenants or confused elderly residents. My first strange call came at 12:46 a.m. A woman whispered, barely audible, asking for maintenance because her ceiling was leaking. I pulled up the address. The building existed, but the apartment number didn't. I told her that politely. She went quiet, then said, "It's dripping on my face." I asked what was leaking. Water, paint. She didn't answer. Instead, I heard a slow dripping sound through the phone, followed by breathing that wasn't synced with hers. I logged the call as a system error. Over the next week, the same woman called every night at the same time. Same whisper, same non-existent apartment. On the 7th night, curiosity took over. I searched old city records during my break. The building had suffered a fatal collapse years earlier. One apartment caved in from a burst pipe. A woman was trapped inside, pinned under the ceiling, face up. I quit without notice. The calls continued after I left. Sleep became harder after that. Silence felt loud. I took sleeping pills, white noise, anything to keep my thoughts from drifting back to those voices. Eventually, exhaustion pushed me into another overnight job. This time as a train platform attendant at a small suburban station. Only freight trains passed through at night. My job was to make sure no one was on the tracks. At 2:05 a.m., a child stood at the far end of the platform. He wore a backpack and stared down the tracks, feet inches from the edge. I approached slowly, calling out to him. He didn't react. When I got close enough to see his face, my stomach dropped. His eyes were wrong, cloudy, unfocused, like old glass. I told him trains weren't stopping. He nodded and said, "I know. I'm waiting." "For what?" I asked. "For the one that didn't stop last time." A horn blared in the distance. The child stepped forward and vanished. The freight train passed through seconds later. I checked security logs. A boy matching that description had died there in the 1980s. Fell asleep on the platform after running away from home. Every night after that, I stood farther from the edge. The final straw came from a job I never even applied for. I received an email offering overnight monitoring work for a storage facility. No interview, no paperwork, just an address and a start time. Something felt off, but curiosity pulled me in. The facility was massive, rows and rows of metal doors stretching into darkness. My office was a small glass box at the center. Cameras showed every aisle, or so I thought, at 3:33 a.m. One camera feed flickered to life on its own. It showed an aisle that wasn't on the map. The doors were older, rusted, numbers scratched instead of printed. One door was open. Inside was my office, my chair, my desk. Me sitting there staring straight into the camera. Except the version of me on the screen slowly smiled, wider than any human should. I slammed the monitor shut. When I looked up, the glass walls reflected someone standing behind me. I didn't turn around. I walked out and never stopped walking. I don't work nights anymore. I don't answer unknown calls. I don't stay in places after midnight unless I have to. Some people say fear fades with time. They're wrong. Fear just learns where you live. I thought moving closer to family would help. Familiar streets, familiar voices, normal routines. I told myself that whatever followed me only existed in places where night swallowed everything whole. I was wrong. Night doesn't care where you are. It just waits. I started driving rideshare for a while, strictly late evening, never past midnight. That rule lasted until a bonus popped up. Double pay for overnight hours. I accepted one ride at 12:08 a.m., just one. Pickup location was a quiet residential street, the kind with old trees leaning over the road like they were listening. A woman got into the back seat without saying a word. She smelled faintly of rain, even though the night was dry. I asked where she was going. She gave an address only 10 minutes away. Her voice sounded distant, like she was speaking from underwater. Halfway there, I noticed something strange in the rear-view mirror. She didn't blink, not once. Her eyes stayed fixed on my reflection, uncomfortably focused. I tried to make small talk. No response. As we turned onto the final street, my GPS recalculated and froze. The address disappeared. The woman leaned forward slightly and said, "You passed it." I pulled over and turned around. The back seat was empty. The app showed the ride as completed. 5 stars, no passenger name, no payment record. The next morning, I searched the address she gave me. It led to a small memorial plaque by the roadside. A woman had been killed there in a hit-and-run accident years earlier. The driver was never found. That was the last ride I ever accepted after dark. Weeks later, insomnia crept back in. When you stop working nights, your body doesn't forget them. At 3 a.m., I'd lie awake, listening to the house settle, every creak sounding deliberate. One night, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. Slow, measured, familiar. I sat up, heart racing, staring at the door. The handle didn't move. The footsteps stopped just on the other side. Then came a knock. 3 taps, evenly spaced. I didn't answer. A voice whispered my name, perfectly mimicking my own tone. Calm, patient, like it had all the time in the world. I held my breath until morning light crept under the door. When I finally opened it, the hallway was empty. But on the wall, written in faint scratches, were the words, "You stopped looking back." After that, I began documenting everything. Dates, times, sounds, calls, faces. I needed proof, not for anyone else, but for myself. Something to remind me I wasn't imagining it. The patterns became clear. Everything happened between midnight and 4. Everything waited for me to notice. One night, while reviewing my notes, my phone buzzed with a notification. A voicemail, no missed call. Just the message. I pressed play. All I heard was breathing, slow, close, then a familiar sound.